Well done, General. Let's see if Yuriko can persuade the local allied forces to join our cause.
Konnichiwa, we won with Yuri.
We won with Yuri.
Exactly 2 years ago today, I made the first Command & Conquer theory on this channel. The video basically said that Yuriko Omega is Yuri's daughter, which has become a rather widely accepted fact at this point.
She is going to be able to escape. Of course, as we all know, Yuriko, secretly the daughter of Yuri.
Yuriko is the Empire's psionic commando who, for the most part, shares the same abilities as Yuri. From telekinesis to psychic blast, even mind control, as seen in Uprising. Yuriko's name can be broken into Yuri and Ko. With Ko meaning child of in Japanese, Yuriko's name is essentially daughter of Yuri. Going way back, people voiced loads of objections towards my Yuriko theory, but hey, we have come a long way over the past 2 years and have learned so much more of the lore behind the CNC franchise. I now have answers to every doubt that was raised. While researching for this video, I have gone down the deepest rabbit hole yet. I'm honestly excited for this. Today, we re-examine my very first theory. Not only will I present a wide array of new evidence supporting Yuriko's origin, I will prove that the birth of Yuriko was a long-anticipated event orchestrated by shadowy masterminds behind the curtain, and was closely linked to the birth of the Empire of Resin-San itself. Starting with Yuriko's name, some viewers had brought up how Yuriko is quite a common name in Japan, with its true meaning being Child of Lily. This is fair. Even in Uprising, Yuriko's campaign flag has a lily emblem. But let us not forget that Red Alert 3 was made by American developers meant to be consumed by an English-speaking audience. From the perspective of a Westerner playing Red Alert 3, the Yuri part of Yuriko would easily allude to the megalomaniac from Red Alert 2. The real issue here, though, is Yuriko's surname. Listen to this clip from Uprising, where we got our most informative glimpse regarding Yuriko's background.
Yuriko's history is somewhat murky. Some sources say that her real name is Yuriko Matsui, and that Omega is simply a code name used by the military. According to these same sources, she was born in the small coastal town of Tanabe and exhibited paranormal powers from the time she was very young. When the government learned of these talents, she was taken away to the Shiro Psychic Research Center.
You heard it loud and clear, Yuriko's last name was Matsui. And that's definitely not Yuri's last name. Could Matsui be the name of Yuri's wife? This comment was correct. A Japanese lady is unlikely to be willing to deny her child of her husband's surname, even at the expense of concealing the child's identity. So it is true that Yuriko was born to a Japanese father whose last name was Matsui. Or is it? Do we really know what Yuriko's last name is? Even Brenda expressed her doubts about her sources.
Yuriko's history is somewhat murky. Some sources say, according to these same sources,
Still think those murky sources are somewhat reliable? I bet none of you took the time to read through the mission briefing of the second Yuriko campaign level. Look at it! After Yuriko's escape attempt, they give her a new surname. The game is explicitly telling us that Yuriko's last name is not Matsui. The Empire had very special reasons to cover up Yuriko's true origin. So they invented a false backstory for her, and intentionally spreaded the story over to the Allied media news reports. Alright, now comes the elephant in the room. Inside Yuriko's campaign story, she apparently had a sister, Izumi. What's the deal with Izumi? Did Yuri have a second daughter? I find that unlikely. According to Izumi's loading screen, her family origin is completely unknown. Now, we know the Shiro Psychic Research Facility largely took orphans as test subjects. Think about it. If a bunch of orphan girls were locked away and getting experimented on, they'd naturally cling onto each other, to the point that they'd refer to each other as sisters. They had no other family besides each other. Those girls weren't really biological sisters, they were more like close friends. Speaking of which, Yuriko's voice lines have always teased us about a friend of hers.
Are you my friend? Who needs friends?
Yuriko's disdain towards having friends suggests a possible betrayal she'd experienced, presumably from the only key character in her story, Izumi. Alright then, you might be thinking, if Izumi wasn't related to Yuriko, how comes she had Yuriko's powers? There are a few possibilities. The Shiro Sanctorium worked mostly with ordinary people.
A detachment of Imperial Archer Maidens volunteered to provide extra security here in exchange for psychic training.
This means that people without psychic genes are still capable of achieving telekinesis to an extent. By the way, according to the lore, Archer Maidens are rejected Rocket Angels. They first lost their Rocket Angel job, now they're quitting their Archer job too and want to become part-time Yurikos? Some people really can't set up a goal in life. So, Izumi may have been someone born without psychic powers who later received psionic training. Or, as many of you were eager to point out, she could have been a carbon copy of Yuriko, which kinda makes them related, genetically speaking. The Empire had been mass-producing Yuriko clones for sure. There are the garden variety ones we use, 6 Yurikos in each psionic decimator, transit tubes doing free Yuriko shipments all day long. Even those trauma stations we heal up at are stuffed with clones. Then, at the end of the Yuriko campaign, we even saw 4 more Yuriko clones, imprisoned in stasis chambers just like Izumi's, fading away ominously. So, how would we distinguish between the original Yuriko and Yuriko clone? We know that the true Yuriko can mind control others, while her weaker clones cannot. During the final battle, Izumi seems to have quite a few ninjas at her aid, did she not? But look, those red ninjas were simply affiliated with Dr. Shimada's army from a bit earlier, which also had red coloration. The fact that we could take over those ninjas means that Izumi was not in fact mind-controlling them. As is the case during any Yuri mirrors, already mind-controlled units cannot be mind-controlled again. So if Izumi was a weaker clone, how is it that her power level appeared to match Yuriko's? Truth is, Yuriko was made to wear a psychic dampener even while fighting on the battlefront. Izumi, on the other hand, wore psychic enhancement suits. This was hardly a fair fight to begin with. When Yuriko was awakened, she retained little memory of her past. Throughout her campaign stories, she had to search through the facility's files in order to restore memories, with each memory fragment helping her regain powers. Yuriko would be pretty susceptible to deceptions given her amnesia. Don't you think it was kinda sus that in the beginning, Izumi had to specially tell Yuriko she was her sister?
I am Izumi, your sister. You must listen to me.
This is pretty much narrative trope at this point. Random girl shows up and claims to be your long-lost sister. Girl emotionally manipulates you. Girl gets you to do her bidding. Girl gets what she wants and is revealed to not be your sister at all. You are left standing there feeling stupid. Cliché. Now that I mentioned the memories Yuriko could uncover, I got to point out the importance of those memories. How could I have disregarded this embedded narrative altogether when I was playing Uprising as a kid? Take a look. This one was the reason I decided to make this video to begin with. During the first chapter of Yuriko's campaign, you can come across a file labeled Remembered Love.
Each time I learn about myself from one of these data terminals, I regain some of the power that my captors have been trying to suppress.
When this memory is recovered, Yuriko gains an upgrade point for her mind control talents. For a girl who was taken from her family since a young age and grew up in a torture facility, the only love Yuriko had ever received would be from her parents. Now, why on earth would remembering about her parents somehow enhance Yuriko's mind control power? Heck, Yuriko's mind control talent is literally named Psychic Domination. It can't get more obvious than that.
Once I mastered the psychic domination talent, everyone in this facility started being much nicer to me.
Be one with Yuri.
I took notice of those secret files when I was spending literal days trying to beat the Yuriko campaign by only juggling. And during that dark time, Yuriko's theme got perpetually stuck in my head. After the theme I echoed over and over a million times, something dawned on me. Take a listen at it, see if you notice anything. Do you hear it? Let's speed up the music. Now do you hear something familiar? What I'm about to play next is Yuri's theme from Red Alert 2: Yuri's Revenge. If I were to take Yuriko's theme, adjust the spacing between its notes a bit, and play both themes together. Yuriko's theme is a slowed down version of Yuri's theme. Yuriko's theme song is the tale of the demon princess. Notice that Yuriko is referred to not as a queen, but as a princess, suggesting that there was a king before her who had his own run at endangering the world. Looking at the franchise as a whole, faction colors seem to play a pretty significant role story-wise. Factions sharing the same color can be traced back to the same origin. The most obvious example is the color red. It is obviously the color of Soviets. In the Soviets ending of Red Alert 1, we saw the Brotherhood of Nod operating behind the USSR as a secret society. Then, by the general's timeline, China would have broken from the Soviet Union. Now, let's switch over to the color purple. Right, Yuriko's campaign flag is pink, but look at the color of her shirt inside the missions. This is positively purple. The purple coloration seems to indicate a close association between Yuri and Yuriko. But how does Cabal and Screen fit into the picture? Okay, Chris actually thought Yuriko's new telekinetic particles were ripped from a Screen portal, which was a fun thought. As I discussed in my Yuri and Kane theory, Westwood originally intended to review Yuri as Kane's creation, much like Cabal. The plot of their cancelled CNC finale included the arrival of Screen and Yuri accidentally being sent back in time. In that video, I pointed out the striking similarities between Yuri and Screen's arsenal, such as those flat-chipped aircrafts that shoot energy bots and operate in both the vacuum and planetary atmospheres. Not to mention Screen's mind control technology, where their cultists and mastermind behave exactly like Yuri clones and Yuri Prime. Point is, Yuri's army was built using blueprints extracted from the Tacitus. Another big revelation came from that theory, and I've wanted to bring it up for a long time. Many of you left comments in that video pointing out that floating discs, banshees, and storm riders weren't the only weird alien-looking aircraft inside CNC. There's a fourth aircraft that fits the description very closely, the Imperial Skywing. You guys were correct, and I did not realize this at all. Skywing is nothing like a conventional aircraft. It feels like something straight from the Tiberium universe. Something we've always overlooked about Red Alert 3's story is exactly how killing Einstein caused the birth of the Empire of Rising Sun. Most of us probably just assumed that some sequence of butterfly effect chain reactions somehow brought the Empire into existence. Some have speculated that killing Einstein deleted the nuclear weapons from human history, hence Japan was never defeated during World War II. That doesn't make much sense given the existence of far more deadly weapons in this timeline, such as the vacuum imploder. But the mystery behind the Empire's rise to power can now be explained, and you guys were the ones who solved it. As mentioned in my first Yuriko theory, because killing Einstein wiped out the Allies' military advantage, Stalin never saw the need to recruit Yuri for the Cyclops project. In this new timeline, Yuri no longer served Russia. Instead, he brought his knowledge of the Tacitus to Japan. This contributed directly to the Empire achieving technological superiority. They became unstoppable by replicating the much advanced Screen weaponry. Now, let's take a step back and look at the Empire's arsenal. Skywing's basically Storm Rider. There's a giant robot walker that shoots lasers, a tripod super unit with 3 heads, human-like cyborgs magically appear in buildings, psionic decimator, stasis field, sentient AI piloting Gigafortress and the mothership.
Are you aware of them attacking me?
Tankbusters and disintegrators firing metal-piercing lasers, also both being the only basic anti-armor infantries that cannot shoot air. Remember this one, it's gonna be important later. Point is, there are way too many correlations between the Empire and Skrin. King Oni was even said to be extremely unorthodox and made of some sort of new compound. Alien mineral, anyone?
We're seeing formulas, engineering data, genetic codes. Material I can't even begin to recognize.
Look at the Empire's otherworldly units with fresh eyes. All their insane technological breakthroughs did not come out of nowhere. They learned from the Tacitus, and Yuri was the one who brought this knowledge to them. Alright, so the acquisition of Yuri would have helped the Empire achieve world domination. But how did Yuri wind up traveling to Japan in the first place? To answer that, we'll turn back to Yuriko. This cutscene describes how Yuriko got captured by the evil cryocopter.
Her reign of terror ended when the Allied forces invaded Tokyo. Yuriko was found unconscious under the rubble of the Imperial Palace and taken into custody.
Yuriko was found unconscious under the rubble of the Imperial Palace. How did the real Yuriko end up in the Imperial Palace? I believe her career was of great interest to the Japanese royalties, because they were the very cause of her existence. Sounds far-fetched? Listen to this comment Yuriko made about Prince Tatsu.
Allied propaganda demonizing the Crown Prince Tatsu. If not for the prince, I might never have been born, for better or worse.
If not for the prince, I might never have been born. This debunks altogether the notion that Yuriko was born to an ordinary family, then later discovered by the Imperials. The news reporters indeed got tricked. The Imperial royalties were directly responsible for Yuriko's birth. There is something bigger going on here, and Yuriko was part of a plot conspired by the Imperial ruling class itself. Looking through this lens, Yuri's arrival to Japan and Yuriko's birth were not random events at all. It appears that the Crown Prince personally invited Yuri to their aid. Unsatisfied with merely tapping into the Tacitus, the royalties wished to weaponize Yuri himself. However, Yuri was too valuable an asset to be risked, so they arranged the birth of Yuri's daughter, whom they can conduct research on instead. That is why Yuriko claimed she wouldn't have existed if not for Prince Tatsu. Yeah, they probably kidnapped Yuri's daughter, then tucked Yuri in a stasis chamber somewhere. Pause here. How did the Empire even get the idea of recruiting Yuri to begin with? In the Red Alert 2 timeline, Yuri was hidden away the entire time, working on the Psycorps project for Stalin. The world only came to learn of his existence when Romanov decided to pull out the big guns. In the Red Alert 3 timeline, where the Psycorps project was never a thing, the Empire wouldn't have even known who Yuri was. That is unless they had informants from another timeline. Okay, I know that sounds ridiculous. Hear me out. Tim Curry's time travel was the singular event leading to the Empire's existence. The Empire's rise may not have been an inadvertent byproduct of this time travel at all. Someone from the original timeline could have sabotaged this time travel mission in order to create the Empire. This saboteur of ours can't just be any outsider. Only someone within Soviet's secret time machine project could pull such strings. Got an idea who this could be?
A profile of Dr. Gregor Zelinsky, considered to be an expert in relativity and physics and a complete nutjob. How do he and Dr. Shimada know each other?
Yeah, why does Dr. Zelinsky have contacts with an Imperial scientist? This was too oddly specific a detail for the Uprising devs to have included. Dr. Zelinsky wasn't even in this game. The devs clearly wanted to call attention to something. Okay, we can tell that Dr. Shimada didn't just know Dr. Zelinsky through some science conference. The fact that he noted Zelinsky was a complete nutjob inside the formal documents indicates that Shimada knew Zelinsky on a personal level, so much so that they were comfortable joking around. Even then, why was there a file on Dr. Zelinsky inside the top-secret psychic research facility? I believe it is because Dr. Zelinsky was integral to the very existence of this facility, because he allowed the Empire to learn of Yuri. Of course, Zelinsky is too upright a person to work for the Empire knowingly, but a nerd like him could easily be manipulated into serving someone else's agenda. Here's how I imagine things played out. One day, Dr. Zelinsky was chatting with his colleague in science, Dr. Shimada. Zelinsky was passionate about his groundbreaking work and carelessly spoke of the time machine he'd been building. Little did he know, Shimada had been keeping a file on all the Soviet military secrets Zelinsky discussed. This time travel project was quickly brought to the attention of the Japanese royalties. The Japanese wished to become powerful, and an unsuspecting chief Soviet scientist was their ideal pawn. Dr. Shimada was instructed to ask for a personal favor. He would like to send a lab assistant of his to observe the time machine's operation. Empathizing with his good friend's scientific curiosity, Dr. Zelinsky did not wish to turn down his request. Hence, an imperial informant got planted into the heart of the USSR. Dr. Zelinsky had to keep this outsider hidden as to not get into trouble with his authorities. So, he smuggled the imperial informant into a hidden compartment of his time machine. Notice how the spatial positions of time travelers corresponded to their destinations. The hidden informant could have been teleported behind this curtain.
No, touch nothing. We mustn't do anything to disrupt space-time continuum.
In my Krugov's-Boris theory, I sorta said there wasn't much to Zelinsky. Boy, was I wrong. Looking back at Dr. Zelinsky, he always seemed to know more than he let on. His lab assistant was more than ready to throw a bunch of high-ranking officials into their machine, meaning that the time machine was thoroughly ready for launch. However, Zelinsky made excuses as an attempt to prevent the time travel.
No, it isn't ready. It hasn't been tested. We don't even know if it works.
Perhaps at this point, Zelinsky already began suspecting the intent behind Shimada's request. A part of him sensed the dire consequence this trip would result in. Upon returning from the time travel, Zelinsky was the first to realize what had happened. His Japanese friend had betrayed him.
What empire?
The Empire of the Rising Sun, of course.
We now have two mortal enemies? Oh, who knows what nightmares we have created.
While the nightmare they had created was most certainly Cryocopter, there's just the slightest chance that Dr. Zelinsky was referring to the new Empire. The Empire was born, and he made it happen.
We have violated the space-time continuum, and the Empire of the Rising Sun would never have existed. No one knows about this except for you and me, Commander.
Dr. Zelinsky felt an extreme sense of personal responsibility for what happened, so he put his own life in danger and defected to the Allies, as an attempt to eliminate the empire he had created. Well, you say, cool story. Too bad there's no way to verify any of that. Japan had never been shown in the pre-time travel timeline. How can I say for sure that the Japan from Red Alert 2 messed with Soviet time travel to cause the events of Red Alert 3? Truth is, we've had an extensive look into the pre-time travel Japan. Remember Red Alert iOS? That little-known canonical mobile game has supplemented my theories time and again. It takes place in the Red Alert 2 timeline and tells the tale of how Soviets acquired the time travel technology they'd later employ at the beginning of Red Alert 3. At one point, Red Alert iOS received a rather quirky update. A third campaign was added to it, the Empire campaign. Up until this point, I have always disregarded that Empire campaign as non-canon. As we all know, the Empire didn't exist in Red Alert 2. The thing is though, it has explicitly been stated that all Red Alert's iOS campaigns are indeed canonical. How can that be? I took a look into this Empire campaign I've always ignored, and oh my gosh, the story actually doesn't contradict the existing lore at all. The writers were very careful to avoid any continuity issues that could be resulted from Japan playing a role in Red Alert 2. This is the message you are greeted with upfront. Commander, you have been chosen by the shogunates to help create a divine vision, a new world order, a new empire of the rising sun. So yeah, the Empire indeed doesn't exist in this timeline. Creating the Empire was Japan's end goal during the post-war crisis, the period preceding the time travel in the beginning of Red Alert 3. There are a few significant details I'd like to point out. Notice how the Emperor mentioned the divine vision.
Let's show the Empire of the Rising Sun that their divine destiny of world domination is nothing but an insane fantasy.
Looks like that wasn't just the case in the new timeline. Japan had always believed in their destiny of world domination with a fervent faith. Long before the time travel, Japan had already been planning the birth of their empire all along. Then, take note that it is the Emperor who's giving you the mission briefings. As is the case with all other Red Alert campaigns, you'd get a military commissioner go over intels. Notice how different this Emperor looks. EA even had to redesign him to avoid legal complications with his original actor. Why go through all that hassle when they could have just put any intel officer in his place, like Suki maybe? The writers were calling special attention to the fact that the Imperial royalties were involved in planning the Empire's rise. Think back to Yuriko's comments on the prince.
Allied propaganda demonizing the Crown Prince Tatsu. If not for the prince, I might never have been born, for better or worse.
As Godot Katagiji told me on Discord, up until World War II, a Japanese emperor never made public appearances or met anyone who wasn't directly serving him. The fact that the emperor is personally supervising this series of operations shows just how much fulfilling this divine destiny meant to him. To continue, the emperor noted that they intended to expand their influence in the Pacific Rim. This is evidence in the Red Alert 2 Allied campaign, where you see the USS Arizona Memorial, indicating that Japan had attempted to attack Pearl Harbor, and failed. But somehow, someway, after the time travel in Red Alert 3, Japan appears to have held Pearl Harbor for ages. How is this possible? If an Imperial informant arrived at the Brussels Conference in 1927, Japan would have received extensive instructions on how their attack would play out in 1941. Given pre-time travel Japan's interest in taking the Pacific, that's no doubt part of the intel their time travel informants would bring to the past. Let's get into the gameplay of this campaign, shall we? Right away, we see that Japan did not have nanocores. In fact, they built structures like every other faction does. For vehicles, they got tsunami tanks and sudden transports. At their core, those were just regular tanks and transport vessels. Notice a complete absence of otherworldly Scrin-esque technologies in Japan's arsenal. And whoa, did I just see tank busters shooting air? Their weapon was designed for anti-air combat, matching the conventions for all other anti-armor infantries. I believe this is evidence that in the RA3 timeline, the Empire augmented Scrin disintegrator lasers into their existing tank buster cannons, hence rendering them unable to shoot air, like the Synths. A side note, the Sleeper Ambush support power in Red Alert 3 spawns 5 tank busters anywhere on the map. The lore explains this as, somehow at some point, the Empire must have planted tank buster sleeper cells in militarized zones. The question is, how did the Empire know precisely where to hibernate tank busters? Japan certainly didn't have enough population to cover every inch of the ground. A time-traveling informant from the future, however, would be able to provide the exact coordinates where Techbusters will one day be needed. Hey, Japan even had airfields in Red Alert LS. Sure, the faction produced Tengus and BXs, but without their transform abilities, those were essentially ordinary fighter jets and helicopters. This is far from the technological miracles we see in Red Alert 3, where the Imperial Force's versatility completely negated the faction's need for dedicated airfields. The pre-time travel Japan stood no chance at world domination, and they knew it. So, it would make sense that when Japan got winds of Soviet's time travel project from Dr. Zelinsky, they'd jump to seize their possibly only opportunity of fulfilling their divine destiny. With their limited powers and resources, the Emperor knew they could never take over the world. However, perhaps they could help out the Japan in another timeline and offer that nation a chance at what they could only dream of. The Emperor planned to create an empire in another timeline that he would never see for himself. In some later iOS missions, we get access to the Japanese commando. Strangely, it is Izumi. In all other instances, this game has used the commando characters from Red Alert 3. Why was it that the devs didn't follow that trend and give us Yuriko? Well, you could explain Natasha's presence in Red Alert 2's timeline as her already having been born. But in this timeline, Yuri never went to Japan. Therefore, Yuriko had never been born and literally could not show up here. I'm telling you, the devs were ultra considerate when putting this game's lore together. The Emperor here displayed quite a fascination in psionic weaponry, and we learned that Japan had already delved into a fair share of psychic research in this old timeline. This makes sense because the Psychic Dominator disaster was a worldwide event that impacted nations all across the globe. Having lived through and witnessed Yuri's prowess, Japan no doubt saw psychic technologies as mean to fulfill their ambition. However, all they were able to achieve was some half-baked mimicry of Yuri's technology. Izumi, an ordinary girl, had been trained to fire telekinetic projectiles. That's right, Izumi couldn't even juggle with her mind. This was nothing compared to Yuriko's mind control talents we see in the new timeline. Japan could only figure out so much on their own. If only they had Yuri as a consultant for their psionic research. But that's not possible at this point in time. Yuri had been imprisoned inside the highly secure Allied facility. So, the Emperor found another opportunity to bring the new empire into reality. Time travel. Upon arriving to the past, the Japanese informants instructed the imperial leadership to recruit a man named Yuri, before Yuri gave his services to the Soviet Union. Through this intricate sequence of events, Japan now holds the knowledge of the Tacitus. The Empire of Rising Sun was born. Over in Red Alert 3, when the Empire learned that they only existed because of a time travel, their spirit was devastated. They thought they were just an accident. They thought their divine destiny was nothing but vanity. The Empire wasn't aware of the hopes bestowed upon them by the Japan of another timeline. They had no idea about the meticulous amounts of planning that pushed them to the top. They never knew how worthy they were of existing. This has been a theory for Yuri. Battle Control offline.
No, you can't do this to me! He's not the real Mr. Initiate, I am!